The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gates as Captain Marcus stood at his post. He had been a royal guard for 15 years, and in all that time, he had seen many things. People came to the palace gates every day with requests, complaints, and sometimes desperate pleas. But today would be different from any other day in his long career. Marcus adjusted his uniform and looked down the road. The morning shift had just begun, and already a small crowd was gathering near the entrance. Merchants were bringing their goods, officials were arriving for meetings, and tourists were taking photographs from a distance. It was a typical Tuesday morning at the palace. Then he noticed her. A small figure was running up the road, her bare feet slapping against the hot pavement. She could not have been more than 8 years old. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hair was tangled, and her face was streaked with tears and dust. She was running with a desperation that made Marcus straighten up and pay attention. The little girl reached the gates and grabbed onto the iron bars with both hands. Her chest was heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The other guards noticed her too, and one of them started to move toward her, probably to send her away. Children often came to the gates, hoping to see the royal family or asking for money. But something about this child was different. Marcus could see it in her eyes. This was not curiosity or poverty driving her. This was pure terror. She spotted Marcus and locked eyes with him. Then she started shouting, her voice raw and breaking. The words tumbled out in a rush, almost impossible to understand at first. Marcus walked closer to the gate, holding up his hand to stop the other guard from sending her away. The girl was crying and speaking at the same time, pointing frantically down the road. Marcus knelt down to her level, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Other people nearby had started to stare. Some looked annoyed at the disturbance. Others looked concerned. Marcus focused on the child. Her name was Alina, she managed to tell him between sobs. She kept pointing at a white van that was parked about 200 meters away from the palace gates. The van looked ordinary enough, like the kind delivery companies used. It had no markings on it and the windows were tinted dark. Alina was begging him to check the van. She kept saying there were children inside. Her brother was in there. They had been taken. Please, please, she kept repeating, her small hands gripping the bars so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Marcus felt his training kick in. But he also felt something else. A father himself, he recognized genuine fear when he saw it. This child was not making up stories. Something had terrified her badly enough to run all the way to the palace gates for help. The protocol was clear. Civilians making claims needed to be directed to the police station. The royal guard was not supposed to leave their posts for matters outside the palace grounds. Marcus knew this. He had followed these rules for 15 years without question, but he looked at Elena's face, at the desperation in her eyes, and he made a decision that would change everything. He called over his colleague, Guard Daniel, and quickly explained the situation. Daniel looked skeptical. They got false alarms all the time. People claimed all sorts of things to get attention or to test the guards. Leaving their posts could mean serious consequences. Alina started crying harder. She could see them hesitating. She fell to her knees, her hands pressed together in a pleading gesture. Her voice became even more desperate. Her brother was only 5 years old. There were other children too. The bad men were going to drive away soon. Please, please check. Marcus looked at the van again. From where he stood, it looked completely normal. There was no movement, no sounds, nothing suspicious. If he walked over there and found nothing, he would look foolish. He might even face disciplinary action for abandoning his post. But if he did nothing, and this child was telling the truth, he would never forgive himself. He made his choice. Marcus told Daniel to stay at the gate and watch their position. He opened the smaller pedestrian gate and stepped outside the palace grounds. Alina immediately grabbed his hand, her small fingers surprisingly strong. As they walked toward the van, Marcus kept his hand near his radio. The street was busy with morning traffic. Cars passed by without stopping. People walked past, busy with their own lives, not noticing anything unusual. The van sat quietly in its parking spot, looking innocent. Alina was pulling him faster now, her panic increasing as they got closer. She kept looking back at the van, as if afraid it would disappear. Marcus tried to keep his expression calm and professional, but inside, his heart was starting to beat faster. They were about 50 meters away when Marcus noticed something. The van was running. He could see the slight shimmer of exhaust fumes in the air. Why would someone leave a van running while parked? It was a hot day, but delivery drivers usually turned off their engines when making stops. Alina tugged at his sleeve, whispering urgently. The man was inside the front seat. She had seen him. She had been playing with her brother near the market when the man had offered them candy. Her brother had gone closer, and the man had grabbed him. Alina had run after them, screaming, but nobody had helped. The man had pushed her brother into the van, and when she tried to climb in after him, the man had shoved her hard, and she had fallen. The van had started to drive away, but then it had stopped here near the palace. She did not know why it had stopped, but she saw her chance and ran for help. Marcus felt cold despite the warm morning sun. If this story was true, they were dealing with child abduction. That white van could be holding multiple children right now. He reached for his radio to call for police backup, keeping his eyes fixed on the vehicle. That was when the van's engine revved louder. Someone was preparing to drive away. Marcus started walking faster, and Alina broke into a run, pulling him with her. The van started to move, pulling away from the curb slowly. They had to stop it now, or it would disappear into the city traffic. And those children, if they were really inside, might never be found. Marcus started running, his boots pounding the pavement, his mind racing through his options. This moment would define everything that came next. Marcus ran faster than he had moved in years. His uniform felt heavy, his equipment belt bouncing against his side, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Alina was still beside him, her small legs working hard to keep up. The white van was picking up speed now, merging into the morning traffic. He shouted into his radio while running, giving his location and requesting immediate police assistance. His voice was steady despite his racing heart. Years of training took over. He reported a possible child abduction in progress, described the van, and gave the direction it was heading. The van turned at the next corner, and Marcus pushed himself harder. He could not let it out of his sight. Alina was falling behind now, her breath coming in painful gasps. She had already run so far to reach the palace gates, but she did not stop. She kept going. Driven by the thought of her brother trapped inside that vehicle, Marcus reached the corner and looked down the street. Traffic was heavy. Cars were lined up at a red light about 100 meters ahead, and the white van was stuck in the middle of them. This was his chance. He sprinted down the sidewalk, dodging pedestrians who jumped out of his way in surprise. A woman with shopping bags pressed herself against a building wall. A businessman in a suit stopped and stared. A street vendor selling newspapers watched with his mouth open. The Royal Guard uniform was recognized by everyone, and seeing one running through the streets at full speed was not something that happened every day. The traffic light was still red. The van was trapped, 3 cars behind the front of the line. Marcus could see the driver now through the windshield. It was a man, middle-aged, wearing a cap pulled low over his face. The man was looking in his rearview mirror, and suddenly their eyes met. The driver saw Marcus running toward him. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then the man's expression changed to panic. He honked his horn and tried to pull around the car in front of him, but there was nowhere to go. Cars were packed too tightly. Marcus reached the van just as the light turned green. He banged his fist hard on the driver's door, shouting for the man to stop and open the vehicle. The driver ignored him and accelerated, but the car ahead was moving slowly. Marcus grabbed the door handle, running alongside the van. Alina caught up, breathless and crying. She was screaming her brother's name now. Her small fists pounded on the side of the van. Other people on the sidewalk had stopped to watch. Some were pulling out their phones, recording what was happening. The van driver tried to speed up, but Marcus did not let go. His fingers ached from gripping the handle so tightly. The driver swerved suddenly, trying to shake him off, and Marcus nearly lost his balance. His boots scraped against the asphalt, but he held on. Then he heard it. From inside the van, behind those tinted windows, came the sound of crying. Not one voice, but several. Small voices, frightened voices. Children were definitely inside that van, and they were terrified. That sound changed everything. Any doubt Marcus might have had vanished completely. He pulled himself closer to the door and used his other hand to strike the window hard with his radio. The window cracked but did not break. He struck it again, harder this time. The van driver panicked and jerked the wheel sharply to the right. The van jumped the curb onto the sidewalk. Pedestrians screamed and scattered. The van clipped a trash can, sending it flying. Marcus was thrown against the side of the van but managed to keep his grip on the door handle. Alina had stopped running and was standing in the middle of the sidewalk, her hands covering her mouth in horror. An elderly man had grabbed her shoulders, holding her back from running after the van again. The scene was chaos now. People were shouting. Car horns were blaring. Someone was screaming to call the police. The van bounced back onto the road and the driver floored the accelerator. But Marcus was not giving up. With his last bit of strength, he swung himself around and grabbed onto the side mirror. He pulled his legs up and got one foot onto the running board of the van. The driver looked at him with wild eyes and swerved violently left and right, trying to throw him off. Marcus held on, his muscles burning. He could hear sirens now in the distance. Help was coming, but he could not let this van escape. They were moving faster now, weaving through traffic. Other cars were honking and moving aside. The driver ran a red light, and Marcus heard the screech of brakes as other vehicles slammed to a stop to avoid a collision. This was becoming more dangerous by the second. Marcus knew he had to end this before someone got seriously hurt. With one hand still gripping the mirror, he reached back and pulled his baton from his belt. He smashed it against the driver's window with all the force he could manage from his awkward position. The glass shattered, spraying into the cabin. The driver flinched and threw up his arm to protect his face. The van swerved wildly, and for a terrifying moment, Marcus thought they were going to crash into a parked car. But the driver overcorrected, and the van spun slightly before coming to a sudden stop in the middle of the intersection. Marcus did not hesitate. He reached through the broken window, unlocked the door from the inside, and yanked it open. The driver tried to fight back, throwing a punch at Marcus's face. Marcus blocked it and grabbed the man's arm, using his training to pull him out of the seat. The driver was strong and fought like a desperate man. But Marcus had rage and righteousness on his side. They fell out of the van onto the pavement, grappling. The driver tried to crawl away, but Marcus tackled him, pinning him face down on the road. He pulled out his handcuffs and secured the man's wrists behind his back. Ignoring the cursing and struggling, police cars arrived at that moment, their sirens wailing. Officers jumped out and rushed over. Marcus shouted to them about the children in the van. One officer ran to the back of the van while another helped Marcus hold down the struggling driver. The officer pulled open the back doors of the van. What they found inside made everyone go silent. 7 children were huddled in the dark cargo area. They were young, all under 10 years old, and they looked terrified. Some were crying. Others seemed too shocked to make any sound. Their hands and feet were bound with rope, and their mouths were covered with tape. Marcus felt sick. Alina had been telling the truth, and if he had not listened to her, these children would have disappeared without a trace. He looked back down the street and saw Alina running toward them, the elderly man no longer able to hold her back. Her face was desperate with hope and fear. She reached the van just as the police officers were helping the children out. Each small face that appeared in the doorway made Marcus's heart clench. Then Alina screamed. It was a sound of pure joy mixed with relief. A small boy, no more than 5 years old, with the same dark hair and eyes as Alina, stumbled out of the van on shaky legs. Alina crashed into him, wrapping her arms around him so tightly it looked like she would never let go. Both children were crying, holding each other. The other children were being comforted by police officers and concerned citizens who had stopped to help. The scene at the intersection had transformed into organized chaos. More police cars arrived, their lights flashing blue and red against the morning sun. Ambulances pulled up, and paramedics rushed to check on the children. News vans appeared within minutes, their cameras capturing everything. Marcus stood to the side, his chest still heaving from the chase. His uniform was torn, his hands were scraped and bleeding from the broken glass, and his entire body ached. But none of that mattered as he watched the 7 children being wrapped in blankets and given water by the paramedics. Alina refused to leave. Her brother sighed. The little boy, whose name was Miguel, clung to his sister as if she were his lifeline. A female paramedic was trying to examine him, checking for injuries, but Miguel would not let go of Elena's hand. The paramedic worked around them, her face gentle and understanding. A senior police officer approached Marcus. His name badge read Captain Rodriguez. He extended his hand, and Marcus shook it, feeling the firm grip of respect between officers. Captain Rodriguez wanted to know everything that had happened, starting from the moment Alina appeared at the palace gates. Marcus explained while keeping his eyes on the children. He told the captain about Elena's desperate plea, about how something in her eyes had convinced him to act. He described the chase, the sounds of crying from inside the van, and the moment he realized that this small, brave girl had been telling the absolute truth. Captain Rodriguez listened carefully, taking notes. Other officers were photographing the van from every angle. The interior was being documented as a crime scene. Evidence technicians were already at work, carefully collecting everything that might help with the investigation. The driver was sitting in the back of a police car now, his head down. Marcus looked at the man and felt a surge of anger. How could anyone do this to children? What had he been planning? Where was he taking them? The questions filled Marcus's mind, but he pushed them aside. The important thing was that the children were safe now. A detective approached the group of rescued children, speaking softly and introducing herself. Her name was Detective Sarah Chen, and she specialized in crimes against children. She had a warm smile and kind eyes, and the children seemed to respond to her gentle manner. She needed to ask them some questions, but she assured them they were safe now. One by one, the children told their stories. Each account was heartbreaking. Some had been taken from parks while playing. Others had been lured away from markets with promises of treats or toys. One little girl had been walking home from school when the van had pulled up beside her. The driver had asked for directions, and when she got close to answer, he had grabbed her. The oldest of the rescued children was a 9-year-old boy named Thomas. He had been in the van the longest, taken 3 days ago from a playground across the city. He had watched as the driver added more children, one by one. Thomas had tried to comfort the younger ones, telling them someone would find them, telling them to be brave. His voice shook as he spoke to Detective Chen, and his parents, who had just arrived, broke down in tears. Television reporters were being held back by police tape, but their cameras had long lenses. This story was already going out live across the country. A royal guard had left his post at the palace to chase down a child abductor. It was the kind of story that captured everyone's attention. Marcus's commanding officer arrived, his face a mixture of concern and something else Marcus could not quite read. Colonel Hampton was a strict man who valued discipline and protocol above almost everything. Marcus had broken protocol by leaving his post. There would be consequences for that, no matter how the situation had turned out. But Colonel Hampton surprised him. Instead of immediate reprimand, he placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder and asked if he was all right. Marcus nodded, too emotionally drained to say much. The colonel told him they would discuss the protocol breach later, but for now, he should focus on giving his statement to the police. Alina and Miguel's mother arrived. Having been contacted by the police, she was a thin woman with worried eyes that had probably not seen much sleep recently. She worked 2 jobs to support her children, and on her morning shift at a restaurant, she had left them with a neighbor. The neighbor had stepped inside for just a few minutes, and that was when Miguel had wandered off and been taken. When she saw her children, she ran to them with a cry that came from the deepest part of her soul. She fell to her knees and wrapped both children in her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Alina was crying too, telling her mother over and over that she had found help. The guard had listened to her, that Miguel was safe. The mother looked up at Marcus with tears streaming down her face. She did not have words that seemed big enough for what she felt. Thank you seemed too small? How do you thank someone for saving your child's life? She tried anyway, her voice breaking, her hands reaching out to touch his arm as if to make sure he was real. Marcus knelt down beside the family. He told her that Alina was the real hero. This brave little girl had run all the way to the palace, had refused to give up, had made him listen. Without Elena's courage and determination, None of these children would have been saved. Elena looked at Marcus with those same desperate eyes. But now they held something different. Relief, gratitude, and the beginnings of trust in the world again. She had been terrified that no one would help her, that adults would not listen to a poor, dirty child from the streets. But one man had listened, and that had made all the difference. The other parents began arriving, each reunion more emotional than the last. Fathers who had been searching desperately for their lost children, mothers who had not slept since their babies disappeared, grandparents who had feared they would never see their grandchildren again. Each family collapsed together in tearful embraces, holding their children as if they would never let them go. Detective Chin took Marcus aside after he finished his official statement. She told him something that made his blood run cold. Based on what they had found in the van and preliminary questioning of the driver, this was part of a larger operation. The driver was not working alone. There was a network, and these children were being collected to be sold. Human trafficking. The words felt heavy and dark. Marcus felt sick again. He had stopped this one van, saved these 7 children, but how many others were out there? How many children had already been taken and sold before this van was caught? The detective saw his expression and told him not to think like that. What he had done today had broken open a major case. The driver would talk eventually, and they would track down everyone involved in this network. The sun was higher now, the morning well advanced. The crowd of onlookers had grown large. People were taking pictures and videos, sharing the story on social media. Within hours, Marcus would be famous, though he did not want fame. He had simply done what felt right in the moment. A news reporter managed to get close enough to shout questions at Marcus. How did he feel? What made him decide to chase the van? Was he worried about breaking protocol? Marcus ignored the questions and turned away. This was not about him. This was about 7 children who were going home to their families. Today, instead of disappearing into a nightmare, Colonel Hampton approached again and told Marcus it was time to return to the palace. There would be debriefings, reports to file, and yes, a disciplinary hearing about leaving his post. But the colonel's tone suggested that hearing would be a formality. No one was going to seriously punish a guard who had saved 7 children. Before leaving the scene, Marcus walked back to where Elena was still sitting with her mother and brother. Miguel had fallen asleep in his mother's arms, exhausted from his ordeal. Elena looked up as Marcus approached, and she stood up, her small frame straightening with a dignity beyond her years. She told Marcus she was sorry for causing trouble at the palace gates. She knew guards were important and busy. She had been so scared that no one would believe her. Everyone would think she was just a street kid making up stories for attention. She had run to the palace because she thought if she could reach someone important, someone in a uniform, maybe they would have the power to help. Marcus felt his throat tighten. This child was apologizing to him when she had done nothing wrong. He knelt down again to be at her eye level and told her she had nothing to be sorry for. She had been brave and strong. She had saved her brother and 6 other children. She was a hero, and he was honored that she had trusted him enough to ask for his help. Elena's mother thanked him again, her voice steadier now, but still thick with emotion. She asked if there was anything she could do to repay him. Marcus shook his head. There was no repayment needed. But he did ask her to keep Elena safe, too. Hold her children close, and to remember that there were people in this world who would always try to help when asked. As Marcus walked back to the police car that would take him to the palace, he thought about his own children waiting at home. His daughter was 7, close to Elena's age. His son was 6, only a year older than Miguel. He thought about how he would feel if they were taken, and the fear that gripped his heart was overwhelming. Every parent's worst nightmare had almost come true for 7 families today. But it had not, because one little girl had refused to give up. Back at the palace, word of what had happened had already spread. Guards were talking in hushed, excited voices. Palace staff had gathered in small groups discussing the news. When Marcus walked through the gates, still disheveled and dirty from the chase, something unexpected happened. The guards on duty straightened to attention and saluted him. It was a gesture of respect, and Marcus felt deeply moved by it. Colonel Hampton escorted Marcus to his office. The walk through the palace corridors felt surreal. Marcus had worked here for 15 years, walking these same halls countless times. But today, everything felt different. He had left his post. He had broken protocol. But he had also done something that mattered more than any rulebook. In the colonel's office, Marcus sat down heavily. The adrenaline was wearing off now, and exhaustion was setting in. His hands were bandaged by the palace medical staff, his cuts cleaned and treated. His torn uniform would need to be replaced. But these were minor details in the larger scope of what had occurred. Colonel Hampton sat across from him, his expression serious but not unkind. He explained that technically, Marcus had violated several regulations. Leaving one's post without authorization, engaging in a pursuit outside palace jurisdiction, acting without proper backup or safety protocols, the list went on. By the book, there should be consequences. But the colonel also acknowledged that sometimes the book did not account for human reality. 7 children were alive and safe because Marcus had made a split-second decision to trust a frightened little girl. The palace guard's duty was to protect, and Marcus had done exactly that. The colonel said he would need to write a report, and there would be an official inquiry, but Marcus should not worry too much about the outcome. Then Colonel Hampton did something Marcus had never seen him do in all their years working together. He smiled. Not his usual tight, professional smile, but a genuine expression of warmth and pride. He told Marcus that while he could not officially condone breaking protocol, he was personally very proud of what Marcus had done today. The entire guard force was proud. Marcus had reminded everyone why they wore the uniform in the first place. Over the next few hours, Marcus gave detailed statements to multiple officials. Palace security needed their report. The police needed their information. Even government officials wanted to understand exactly what had happened. Marcus repeated his story again and again, each telling draining him a little more. His wife called, having seen the news. Her voice was frantic with worry and pride mixed together. Was he hurt? Was he safe? Had he really done what the television was saying? Marcus assured her he was fine, just tired. He would be home as soon as he could, and they would talk about everything then. She told him she loved him, that she was proud of him, and that their children were asking when Daddy would be on TV again. By late afternoon, Marcus was finally allowed to go home. He changed out of his damaged uniform into civilian clothes and left, through a side entrance of the palace to avoid the reporters who had gathered at the main gates. The story had exploded across social media. Videos of the chase, taken by bystanders on their phones, had gone viral. Elena's tearful plea at the palace gates had been captured by security cameras. Clips were being shared everywhere. When Marcus arrived home, his children rushed to the door. They had seen their father on television, and they thought he was famous like a movie star. They asked him to tell them the story, to describe the chase, to explain how he caught the bad man. Marcus hugged them both tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of their hair, feeling the solid reality of their small bodies against his chest. His wife stood in the doorway, watching him with tears in her eyes. She understood in a way his children could not yet comprehend. She understood that today could have gone differently. Marcus could have been hurt during the chase. The driver could have had a weapon. The situation could have ended in tragedy, but it had not. And 7 families had their children back because her husband had listened to his heart instead of his rulebook. That evening, as Marcus sat at his dinner table with his family, his phone would not stop ringing. News organizations wanted interviews. The palace press office was fielding requests from around the world. Everyone wanted to talk to the royal guard who had saved 7 children, but Marcus turned off his phone. Tonight was for his family. Tomorrow, he would face the media circus, the official inquiries, whatever consequences came from his actions. Tonight he just wanted to be a father and a husband, to hold his children and remember why what he had done mattered so much. His daughter asked him if he was scared during the chase. Marcus thought about his answer carefully. He told her that yes, he had been scared. But sometimes being brave did not mean not feeling afraid. It meant doing the right thing even when you were scared. He'd been afraid, but Elena's courage had given him strength. Sometimes, he told his daughter, children teach adults important lessons about bravery. As he tucked his children into bed that night, Marcus thought about the 7 children who were also being tucked into their own beds tonight. They were home, safe, with families who would hold them extra tight for many nights to come. That thought made everything else worthwhile. Torn uniform, the scraped hands, the protocol violations, the exhaustion. All of it was worth those 7 lives saved. His son asked one more question before falling asleep. He wanted to know if Marcus would help another kid if they asked. Marcus kissed his forehead and told him yes, always. If someone needed help, especially a child, he would always try to do something. That was not just his job as a guard. That was his job as a human being. Marcus woke to find his face on every newspaper's front page. The headlines told the same story. A royal guard had become a hero by listening to a desperate child. Photographs showed him running alongside the van, Elena's tearful reunion with her brother, and 7 rescued children wrapped in blankets. The attention made Marcus uncomfortable. During breakfast with his family, his phone buzzed constantly with messages from old friends, former colleagues, and strangers thanking him. The palace called early Colonel Hampton needed him for the formal inquiry, as Marcus drove to work in his fresh uniform. The streets felt different. People recognized him, pointed, and waved. At a red light, a woman shouted that he was a hero, his face flushed with embarrassment. At the palace, the atmosphere had transformed. Instead of whispers about protocol violations, there was respect and admiration. Guards nodded warmly. Palace staff stopped to shake his hand. Even royal household members he had never spoken to acknowledged him. The formal inquiry was held in a grand room Marcus had never entered. A panel of senior officials sat behind a long table, Colonel Hampton, palace security representatives, royal household administration, and a government liaison. It looked very serious. Marcus stood at attention and gave his testimony, explaining every decision from when Elena appeared at the gates to when the driver was handcuffed. The panel asked pointed questions. Why had he not waited for police? Why had he left his post without authorization? Did he understand his actions, while successful, had violated protocols? Marcus answered honestly. He had made a judgment call, believing a child in genuine distress. Waiting for police might have meant losing the van. Staying at his post would have meant ignoring someone who desperately needed help. He understood the violations and was prepared to accept consequences, but he would make the same choice again. Some things were more important than protocol, and saving 7 children's lives was one of them. The room went quiet. The panel members exchanged glances. Then the senior official, a distinguished older man with gray hair, spoke. Marcus had put them in a difficult position. Rules existed for important reasons, and they could not simply ignore violations. However, the official continued, sometimes rigid adherence to rules contradicted their very purpose. The royal guard existed to protect and serve. Marcus had done exactly that. The panel had reached a decision before this meeting. Marcus held his breath, was prepared for suspension or disciplinary action. The official stood and the panel followed. While they could not officially encourage guards to leave their posts, they recognized his actions had saved innocent lives. The panel had decided to issue a formal commendation rather than a reprimand. Marcus had acted with courage, quick thinking, and compassion, qualities the royal guard should exemplify. Furthermore, the royal family had taken notice. They were deeply moved by Marcus's actions and Elena's bravery. A special ceremony was being arranged to recognize both their heroism. Marcus felt overwhelmed. He had expected punishment and received praise instead. Colonel Hampton smiled openly. The panel members came around to shake his hand personally. Later that day, Detective Chen visited with news about the investigation. The driver, faced with overwhelming evidence, had begun cooperating. He had given up names, locations, and details about the trafficking network. Police raids were underway across the city. More arrests were being made. Detective Chen told Marcus his quick action had done more than save 7 children. It had broken open a case investigators had worked on for months. Children who had disappeared weeks or months ago were being located and rescued. Families who had lost hope were getting their children back. The detective also brought a message from Elena's family. They wanted to thank Marcus properly when things calmed down. Elena had been asking about him daily, worried the guard was in trouble because of her. Detective Chen had assured her Marcus was fine and being called a hero, which made Alina smile for the first time since her ordeal. The investigation revealed horrifying details. The trafficking ring had operated for over 2 years. Dozens of children had been taken, sold across borders, lost forever. The 7 children Marcus saved were lucky caught early, before being transported out of the country. A few more hours and they would have been gone forever. Marcus listened with a heavy heart. The victory felt bittersweet. Yes, 7 children were safe, and the network was being destroyed. But so many others had not been saved in time. The detective reminded him he could not save everyone, but he had saved the ones he could reach. That mattered more than he might ever fully understand. Over the following week, media attention intensified. International news organizations picked up the story. Marcus received interview requests from television shows worldwide. Eventually, he agreed to one interview with a local journalist who had covered the story fairly. During the interview, Marcus redirected attention away from himself repeatedly. He talked about Elena's incredible courage, emphasized the police and Detective Chen's work, and praised the paramedics and social workers. This was not about one hero making one dramatic rescue. It was about a community coming together. When asked what message he wanted to send, Marcus said that children should be heard. Elena had been a poor street kid who could have been dismissed easily, but her words had been true. Adults needed to take children seriously, especially when asking for help. He also wanted people to know ordinary people could do extraordinary things. He was just a guard who had chosen to act when action was needed. Everyone had opportunities to make a difference. It did not require a uniform or special training, just paying attention and caring. Enough to do something. The interview aired during prime time. Millions watched. Social media exploded with responses. Parents discussed listening to their children. Teachers used the interview in schools. Community groups organized awareness campaigns about child safety and human trafficking. The story had sparked a national conversation. The special ceremony at the palace was scheduled for 2 weeks after the rescue. Marcus would receive a medal for valor. Alina would be recognized as well, though details of her award were kept as a surprise. Alina's mother worried about the ceremony. They had no fancy clothes and had never been inside the palace, but palace staff reached out personally, assuring her everything would be taken care of. Appropriate clothes would be provided. A palace liaison would help them prepare. They were honored guests. Marcus spent the days before the ceremony reflecting. His life had changed in ways he was still processing. He was recognized everywhere, treated differently. But he was the same person. He had just done what felt right. His children were proud, though they did not fully understand his sudden fame. His wife worried about privacy, but was fiercely proud. She had always known he was a good man, and now the world knew it too. Marcus thought about the moment at the palace gates. What if he had sent Alina away? Those 7 children would be gone. One choice, one moment of choosing compassion over procedure, had changed so many lives. The night before the ceremony, Marcus had trouble sleeping. He kept seeing Elena's face, hearing her desperate voice. He thought about Miguel and the other children, their terror and relief. When he finally slept, he dreamed of children playing safely, of families together and whole. He dreamed of Alina smiling, no longer afraid. The morning arrived bright and clear. Marcus dressed in his formal uniform while his wife helped with medals and insignia. At the palace, the grand hall was decorated beautifully. Marcus arrived early and was shown to a waiting room. Colonel Hampton joined him, offering quiet support to ease the tension. Alina and her family arrived at the palace gates in a car sent specifically for them. A kind staff member met them and guided them inside. Alina held her mother's hand tightly, her eyes wide as she looked at the magnificent building. Miguel walked close to his sister, still staying near her, as if afraid to be separated again. Alina wore a beautiful new dress, pale blue with white ribbons. Her hair had been carefully braided. Miguel was in a smart little suit. Their mother wore a simple but elegant dress, touching it nervously, unused to such fine clothing. The kindness shown made Elena's mother want to cry. She had spent her life being invisible, dismissed, treated as less because she was poor. But here in the royal palace, she was being treated like someone important. Her children were being called heroes. Alina was taken to a waiting room, where a cheerful woman explained what would happen during the ceremony. Alina listened carefully, asking questions. She wanted to know if she would see Marcus. The woman assured her yes, she would see the guard who had saved her brother. In the grand hall, guests began arriving. The families of all 7 rescued children had places of honor near the front. Thomas's parents were there, holding hands. Police officers who had participated in the rescue were present in dress uniforms. Detective Chen sat with colleagues. The van driver and accomplices were in jail, awaiting trial. Media representatives were positioned with cameras ready. This ceremony would be broadcast live across the nation. Members of the royal family entered, and everyone stood. The hall fell silent as the senior prince, known for charitable work with children, took his place at the podium. He spoke about duty and compassion. It's about protecting the most vulnerable members of society. The prince described Elena's desperate run to the gates. Her refusal to give up despite being just a small child with no power. He talked about Marcus's decision to trust her, to act immediately. To chase the van despite risk and consequences. Then the prince revealed something new. The investigation had uncovered that the trafficking ring had been planning something much larger. The 7 children in that van were supposed to be part of a shipment of 20 children, scheduled to leave the country that very night. Police had found a warehouse where 13 other children were being held. When the van failed to arrive, the criminals panicked and fled, leaving the children behind, because Marcus had stopped that one van. Because Elena had refused to stay silent, 30 children in total had been saved. 20 recovered from the warehouse, 3 more found in safe houses, and the original 7 from the van. 30 families had their children back. The hall erupted in spontaneous applause. People were crying openly. The families were holding each other, overwhelmed by the magnitude revealed. Elena's mother looked stunned, unable to comprehend that her daughter's bravery had led to so much good. The prince called Marcus forward first. Marcus walked to the stage, his bearing straight and military, but his eyes showed emotion. The prince shook his hand warmly and presented him with the Royal Medal of Valor, one of the highest honors that could be given to a citizen. The medal was pinned to his uniform while cameras flashed. Then it was Elena's turn. She walked forward, holding the staff member's hand. She looked small on that big stage, but held her head high. The prince knelt to her level, speaking gently. Whatever he said made Elena smile, a real smile that lit up her whole face. The prince stood and addressed the audience. He said Elena represented everything good about humanity. She was young, poor, had no power or resources, but she had something more important. She had courage, determination, and unbreakable love for her brother. She had refused to accept that no one would help. The prince presented Elena with a special medal created just for her. The Medal of Courage for Young Citizens. Elena was the first person ever to receive it, but the prince had more surprises. He announced that Elena and Miguel would receive full scholarships to a prestigious school, covering all education through university. Their mother would be given a position working in the palace kitchens, a stable job with good pay. Additionally, the prince announced the creation of the Elena Foundation, a charity dedicated to protecting children from trafficking and exploitation. The foundation would work with police, social services, and communities to prevent child abductions and help rescue victims. Elena's courage would continue protecting children for years to come. The audience stood and applauded for several minutes. Elena looked overwhelmed but happy. Her mother was crying. Miguel stood next to his sister, and the prince put a hand on each child's shoulder. Posing for photographs that would appear on front pages worldwide, after the formal ceremony ended, there was a reception. Marcus finally got to speak with Elena properly. She ran to him and hugged him. She told him she had been scared that he would be in trouble because of her. Marcus assured her everything was fine. He was proud to have helped. Elena looked up at him with those eyes that had convinced him to act. She told him something he would remember forever. Before that day, she had thought people like her did not matter to people like him. Poor kids, street kids, children nobody noticed. She thought palace guards only cared about protecting important people. But Marcus had shown her that she was important too, that her brother mattered, that someone in a fancy uniform would run through streets for children like them. Marcus felt tears in his own eyes. He told Alina that every child mattered, that every life was precious. He was grateful she had trusted him enough to ask for help. Miguel approached shyly and thanked Marcus too. His voice was soft, and he stayed close to Alina, but he was smiling. He was safe now. He was home. The reception continued for hours. Families mingled and shared stories. The rescued children played together under watchful eyes of parents who would probably never let them out of sight again. Counselors had been arranged for all the children. But today was for celebration. Detective Chen told Marcus the final count was even higher than announced. Following leads from arrested criminals, police had discovered connections to trafficking operations in 3 other countries. International cooperation was leading to more rescues. The ripple effect of that one chase was spreading further than anyone had imagined. As families began leaving, Lena's mother approached Marcus one final time. She tried to find words to express her feelings, but Marcus stopped her gently. He told her that seeing her children safe and happy was all the thanks he needed. She should focus on their bright future now. Alina and Miguel waved goodbye to Marcus. Alina called out that she would study hard at her new school and make him proud. Marcus waved back, his heart full. Months later, life had settled into a new normal. Marcus was back at his post at the palace gates, but he was different now. He looked at every person who approached with new eyes. He listened more carefully. He knew that sometimes the most important moments came from unexpected places. Alina thrived at her new school. She was a diligent student, especially interested in law and justice. She told teachers that one day she wanted to help protect other children the way she had been protected. Miguel was doing well too, his trauma fading as childhood resilience worked magic. He was just a happy little boy again. The Alina Foundation was already making a difference. Community awareness programs were teaching children and parents about safety. Police had better resources for investigating child trafficking. Survivors were getting counseling and support. Alina had visited the foundation offices once, seeing her name on the wall. Understanding that her courage was creating lasting change, the anniversary of the rescue came around, and a memorial service was held for children who had not been saved in time. Marcus attended, along with Alina and her family, Detective Chen, and many others. It was a somber reminder that victory was not complete, that work remained. But there was also hope. 30 children who might have been lost had been saved. A criminal network had been destroyed. Laws were being strengthened. Communities were more aware and vigilant. Everyone understood that it had started with one little girl who refused to give up and one guard who chose to listen. Marcus looked at Alina during the service. She was growing taller, more confident, already showing signs of the strong woman she would become. She caught his eye and smiled, and in that smile was everything good about the world. Courage, hope, determination, and an unshakable belief that people could choose to do right, as Marcus returned to work the next day. Standing once again at the palace gates, he thought about the extraordinary gift Alina had given him. She had reminded him why his work mattered. She had shown him that protocol and rules, while important, should never override basic human compassion. She had trusted him in her darkest moment, and he had proven worthy of that trust. Every person who approached the gates now received his full attention. Every request was considered seriously, because Marcus knew the truth Alina had taught him. Sometimes the most important call for help comes from the most unlikely source, and the choice to listen, the choice to act, the choice to care could change everything.